Some cases just, they get under your skin. You know what I mean? In the JonBenét Ramsey case, it's definitely one of those. It's like you're trying to solve a puzzle, but there are just some pieces missing. We have all these details, these little clues, but we still can't figure out what happened. So today we're going deep. We're going to explore this case, look at the evidence, and see if we can maybe finally understand this tragedy.
It really is fascinating. You have a young victim, a seemingly perfect family, a strange ransom note, and then the crime scene itself is like something out of a movie.
Yep.
But it goes deeper than just who did it. This case shows how much we love true crime, how the media can affect what people believe, and how hard it can be to actually get justice.
Yeah, for sure. We have a lot to cover today. Old news reports, court stuff, what the experts think. We really want to understand what happened that Christmas in 1996.
It all starts with this picture-perfect family, right? You have John Ramsey, successful businessman, Patsy, former beauty queen, their son Burke, he was 9, and then JonBenét, she was 6, and, well, everyone knew her from those beauty pageants. They lived in Boulder, Colorado. They had it all, money, big house, but something terrible was about to happen.
Then, on December 26th, everything changes. Patsy calls 911, JonBenét's gone, and that's when the ransom note appears.
Talk about a strange clue.
Right, most ransom notes are short and simple, but this thing was like 2.5 pages long, rambling, filled with weird phrases, almost like it was trying to be literary or something, and the amount they asked for, $118,000. Almost the exact same as John Ramsey's bonus. It's like they wanted everyone to look at him, don't you think?
Yeah, it's definitely suspicious, one of many things in this case that just make you wonder. But before the police can even figure out the ransom note, John finds JonBenét in the basement. It was a horrible scene, a cord around her neck, her mouth was covered with duct tape, she had been hit on the head. It's a terrible way for anyone to die, especially a child. And then the way they handled the crime scene, it just makes it even worse.
Yeah, this is where things get frustrating. The house wasn't locked down right away. Friends and family were coming and going. And John Ramsey, he actually moved JonBenét's body before the investigators could really look at it.
Huge mistake. They might have messed up evidence, lost something important, or misinterpreted clues. Imagine the pressure those investigators were under. The media is all over the place, the family's frantic, and the crime scene is just bizarre. It's easy to see how mistakes could happen.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in big cases, things can go wrong. And those early mistakes can really mess up the whole investigation.
Exactly. From that point on, the investigation was always playing catch-up, trying to put together a puzzle with missing pieces, and to make it even harder, the media went crazy.
The JonBenét case was everywhere. All over the news, magazines, everyone was talking about it. Her pageant photos, the family's money, their seemingly perfect life. It all became part of the story. It was like people couldn't tell what was real and what was just gossip.
It was a feeding frenzy, no doubt. And while media attention can help sometimes keep a case in the public eye, in this case, it might have done more harm than good. All that pressure, the rush to judgment, the constant focus on the Ramseys, it created this chaotic atmosphere where it was almost impossible to find the truth.
It felt like everyone had a theory, like everyone suddenly became an expert. And that scrutiny really affected how the investigation went.
Right, and with all the noise, investigators started focusing on two main things. Did the family do it, or was it an intruder? Both sides had their supporters, both made sense in some ways, but neither had all the answers.
Let's talk about the family first. Unfortunately, Patsy Ramsey ended up in the spotlight.
Yeah, some people who analyzed handwriting said her writing looked similar to the ransom note. And then there was her behavior after JonBenét's death. Some thought it was strange or fake, but remember, everyone grieves differently. There's no one right way to react to something so horrible.
That's true. Grief is complicated. You can't really judge someone for how they act when they've lost a child. But people didn't stop there. Investigators also looked at Burke, JonBenét's brother.
The idea was that maybe Burke, kids fight, maybe he accidentally hurt JonBenét during an argument or something. And then the parents, panicking, they made up the ransom note and staged everything to protect him. It's a scary thought, but investigators couldn't ignore it.
And then there was that Dr. Phil interview years later in 2016. People thought Burke acted strangely, too calm, and that made them think he was hiding something.
We have to remember that Burke was just a kid when this happened. Trauma affects children in different ways. They don't always process things like adults do. We can't judge him based on how he acted years later. It's just not fair.
You're right. And even though there was a lot of suspicion around Patsy and Burke, John Ramsey wasn't totally off the hook.
Some pointed to his money and how the ransom amount was almost exactly his bonus. They thought maybe he planned the whole thing to hide something else, something he was desperate to protect.
Those are all good questions, but the problem is there was no physical evidence connecting any of the family members to the crime.
Exactly. The DNA they found on JonBenét's clothes didn't match anyone in the family. So while some people believe the family was involved, there wasn't enough proof to say for sure.
It's like having a puzzle with a missing piece. You can kind of see the picture, but without that one piece, you'll never know for sure. So if the family didn't do it, who did? That's where the intruder theory comes in.
And there's actually quite a bit of evidence that points to someone breaking in. First, there was an open window in the basement. They didn't see it at first, but it was open. Maybe that's how the intruder got in. It's definitely possible.
Right, and there were those marks on JonBenét's body. Some experts think they could be from a stun gun. That means the attacker was prepared, someone who came ready to hurt her, not just a random act.
And then you have the suspects, people like Bill McReynolds. He was friends with the Ramseys, even played Santa at their Christmas party a few days before the murder.
McReynolds was. Well, he was an odd guy. His connection to the family and some strange things he said put him right on the list of suspects. But just like with everyone else, there wasn't enough to really connect him to the crime.
His case shows just how hard it was for investigators. So many tips, so much information, so many potential suspects. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, especially with the media breathing down their necks.
Oh, and we can't forget about John Mark Carr. Years later, he actually confessed to killing JonBenét.
Oh yeah, Carr. His confession was a huge deal, but it fell apart pretty quickly. His DNA didn't match, his story didn't make sense, and it turned out he just wanted attention. He wanted to be part of this big, famous case.
Even though his confession was fake, it shows something important about this case. Everyone was so interested in it that all kinds of people came out of the woodwork. Some wanted fame, some thought they could help, but most of it led nowhere.
Yeah, it shows that even when everyone wants to find the truth, things can get messy. False leads and bad information can really throw things off track.
So we have these two theories, family or intruder. Both make sense in some ways, but neither is perfect. And that's what's so frustrating about this case.
Exactly. It's a tangled mess, lots of possibilities, but nothing concrete enough to solve it. We go back and forth weighing the arguments, but we never get a clear answer.
It's like reading a mystery novel, but someone ripped out the last few pages. We have the clues, the suspects, but no ending. And what makes it even harder is that this case is about so much more than just the crime itself. It became this cultural phenomenon, a reflection of all our fears and anxieties.
Absolutely. The JonBenét case made us talk about things we usually avoid. It forced us to face some uncomfortable truth about how we treat children, the power of the media, and how public opinion can affect what we think is just.
The media really focused on JonBenét being in beauty pageants. That sparked a huge debate about whether those competitions are okay for little girls. People started questioning the pressure on these kids, how they're seen as objects, and whether it's all just exploitation.
It's a debate we're still having today, and sadly, the JonBenét case is part of that. Patsy Ramsey got a lot of the blame since she was the one who put JonBenét in those pageants.
It's easy for public opinion to turn against someone, especially when the media makes things so dramatic. Patsy became this symbol of everything people didn't like about child beauty pageants. But we can't forget she was also a mom who lost her little girl in a terrible way.
It reminds us that behind every true crime case are real people, families dealing with pain and loss that most of us can't imagine. And in this case, the public attention and all the theories just made things worse for them.
The JonBenét case made us ask all sorts of questions about ourselves, our society, and how we handle tragedy and the unknown. And even today, we don't have all the answers.
So where do we go from here? The case is still unsolved, but that doesn't mean we stop looking. In recent years, people have been using new DNA technology to look at the evidence again. Maybe, with these new tools, we'll finally find out the truth.
That's a hopeful thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe science can finally solve this mystery. But even if we find out who killed JonBenét, will it really bring closure? That's something we'll talk about next time. It's crazy to think that after all this time, we still don't know what happened to JonBenét. You'd think with all the technology we have now, we'd have some answers. Makes you wonder if we're ever going to get a real breakthrough.
Yeah, people really want to know, that's for sure. Back in 2022, there was a lot of talk about using new DNA tech to re-examine the evidence. They thought maybe they could finally identify the killer or at least rule out some of the theories.
Did they find anything? Like, did the DNA lead them to someone?
Well, no, not really. Even with the new technology, the results weren't clear enough. It just shows you that sometimes, even with all the science in the world, the evidence just doesn't give you everything you need.
So it's like the case is stuck. We have all this amazing technology, all these smart people working on it, but we're still asking the same questions we did back in '96. It's kind of discouraging.
It is. It shows how complicated this case is, but it also shows the limits of science. Sometimes the evidence just can't give you a simple answer. And with a case this big, this emotional, the pressure to find those answers is enormous.
It makes you wonder, right? Like, will we ever know what really happened to JonBenét? Is it possible that this will just always be a mystery?
It's tough to say, but one thing's for sure. This case, it's about more than just true crime. It's about how we see ourselves, our society, the big picture.
Yeah, it's not just about who did it. It's about understanding why this case became so big, what it says about us, and how things like this, how they shape how we view crime and justice.
Exactly. This case was a turning point for true crime. People were obsessed with it. And not just because it was a horrible crime, but because it made us think about our own fears, those dark things that could happen anywhere, even in a nice neighborhood like Boulder.
And it made us question those people we trust to keep us safe.
Mm.
The police, the media, the courts, they were all under a microscope.
And that wasn't always a bad thing. It wasn't always fair, sure. But it started conversations about how the police do things, whether the media is being ethical, and how public opinion can sway justice. Those are important things to talk about.
It's like the JonBenét case was this mirror, right? It showed us the good and the bad about ourselves, our kindness, and our cruelty.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's not always comfortable to look in the mirror, but sometimes it's necessary. If we want to make things better to keep our kids safe, we have to face those hard truths.
It's a heavy thought. But with all the theories and the media frenzy, it's easy to forget that at the heart of this, there was a little girl who was killed.
Absolutely. JonBenét, she was someone's daughter, someone's sister, a friend. She had dreams, a whole life ahead of her, and it was taken away. We can't lose sight of that, the real tragedy here, a family that's devastated and they still don't have answers.
Yeah, you can get caught up in the details, the evidence, the suspects, but we have to remember, this is a real story, a real life lost, and a family that's heartbroken.
And the fact that no one's been held accountable, it just makes it even more tragic. There's no closure, just this open wound that never really heals.
It's like a constant reminder that life is fragile, that some mysteries might never be solved.
That's true. But even with all that sadness, there's still hope, right? Hope that someday the truth will come out, that justice will be served, and that we'll remember JonBenét not just for how she died, but for how she lived.
I like that, holding on to that hope for truth and justice, believing that even when things are dark, there can still be light.
We can't bring her back, but we can honor her memory by keeping this case alive, fighting for justice, and trying to create a world where these kinds of things don't happen anymore. And that's where you come in, our listeners. We've talked a lot about the facts, the different theories, but now we want to hear from you. What do you think about all of this?
Do you think it was the family? Or do you believe it was an intruder? What evidence really stands out to you? What parts of the case are the most confusing? Tell us what you think.
Your thoughts, your ideas, they matter. When you share them, you're keeping JonBenét's memory alive. You're helping us all make sense of this tragedy.
So yeah, join the conversation, leave a comment on our website, talk about it on social media, whatever you want. We want to hear from you. We've really dug into the evidence, all the theories. But as we wrap up, I want to look at the bigger picture. What kind of impact did this case have? It was over 20 years ago, but people are still talking about it. Why do you think that is?
I think it hit a nerve, It made us think about things we don't always like to admit, things about our own society, our obsession with true crime, how easily we believe what we read and see.
Yeah, think about how much attention this case got.
Yeah.
It was everywhere. JonBenét's picture, her story, the family, they were constantly being analyzed, judged, speculated on.
Yeah.
I think it changed the way the media deals with these big crime stories. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. The JonBenét case, it was one of the first to be covered like that. 247 news channels. The internet was starting to become a big deal. Information or misinformation, it spread so fast. There were just images, opinions, theories all the time. It was hard to know what was true and what wasn't.
And it wasn't just the amount of coverage, it was the tone, right?
Yeah.
They focused so much on the beauty pageants, the family's wealth, their lifestyle. It was almost like we were peeking into their lives in a way that felt wrong. It was less about news and more about entertainment.
Exactly. And that had consequences, real consequences. It messed with the investigation. It made the public speculate even more. And it definitely made things worse for the Ramseys. It made people question the media. Like, are they doing the right thing? Are they being responsible? Especially when it comes to kids.
Yeah, we're still dealing with that today. How do we report on these cases and still protect the people involved, especially when it's a child? It's a hard balance.
Yeah, it is. And I think the JonBenét case, it's a reminder that the media is powerful. They can shape how we see things, and if they're not careful, they can really hurt people.
It wasn't just the media, though, right? This case brought up other issues, too. The debate about child beauty pageants, for example, that became a much bigger conversation after JonBenét died.
Oh, for sure. People started questioning whether those pageants were right, all that pressure on little girls, the way they're treated. It's a debate that's still going on, and I think we need to keep talking about it. What does it mean for kids when we focus so much on how they look? What are we teaching them about beauty and self-worth? These are important questions.
It's also interesting how this case, it kind of sparked our fascination with true crime. It was one of the first to really grab everyone's attention. And now we have so many documentaries, podcasts, books, all about real-life crimes. Why do you think we're so drawn to these stories?
Well, there's probably a bit of curiosity there, right? We want to understand why people do bad things. Maybe it's a way to deal with our own fears. But I also think there's something hopeful about it. Like, if we understand the darkness, maybe we can stop it from happening again. Maybe by seeking justice for the victims, we can make the world a little safer.
Yeah, I think you're right. And even though we still don't know who killed JonBenét, this case has changed us. It's made us think about the media, about difficult social issues, and it's reminded us that we should never stop searching for the truth.
That's a good way to put it. And as we finish up, I want to encourage everyone to keep learning about this case, to look at the evidence and form your own opinions. There's a lot of information out there, court documents, interviews, expert opinions. It's all there if you want to dig deeper.
And let us know what you think. Leave comments on our website, talk about it online, send us an email. We really want to hear your thoughts.
Because finding the truth, getting justice, it's something we do together. We have to engage with these stories, ask the hard questions, and keep looking for answers.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. As we close our deep dive into the JonBenét Ramsey case, let's remember JonBenét, not just as a victim, but as a little girl who had a whole life ahead of her. Let's keep searching for answers, keep fighting for justice, and work towards a world where these tragedies don't happen anymore.
That's right. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.